can't sleep? Stressed about the upside down? This soothing retelling of Stranger Things Season 2 will lull you into a peaceful slumber. Join us as we explore the mystery of Hawkins, Indiana, and drift off to dreamland. Welcome, dear listener, to a peaceful journey back to the small town of Hawkins, Indiana. Tonight, we'll walk together through the events of autumn 1984, when the leaves were turning golden, and the air carried whispers of mystery. Close your eyes now, take a deep breath, and let yourself sink into comfort as we explore this story at a gentle, drowsy pace. The year is 1984, and in Hawkins, life moves like honey in winter, slow, sweet, and full of quiet moments that lull you into tranquility. Our young heroes have grown a little older, a little wiser, but they're still the same brave souls we came to love. Tonight, their adventure will guide you softly towards sleep. As October settles over Hawkins like a warm blanket, we find our friends adjusting to a new rhythm of life. Mike Wheeler sits in his basement, the familiar glow of board games and comic books surrounding him like old friends. The Dungeons & Dragons campaigns continue, but there's a gentleness to these gatherings now, a comfort in routine that feels like coming home. Dustin Henderson has returned from summer camp, his gap-toothed smile as bright as ever, carrying stories and a mysterious new discovery that will soon change everything. But for now, in these quiet moments before the adventure begins, he's simply a boy, sharing excitement with his dearest friends. Lucas Sinclair practices his basketball shots in the fading afternoon light, the rhythmic bounce of the ball creating a meditation-like cadence. Each shot, each gentle thud against the backboard, marks time passing peacefully in this small Indiana town. Will Byers, brave Will, sits at his kitchen table with gentle sunlight streaming through the windows. His mother Joyce watches him with careful, loving eyes as he works on his artwork. The soft scratch of pencil on paper creates a soothing soundtrack to their quiet afternoon together. Will draws what he sees in his mind, sometimes beautiful landscapes, sometimes darker visions that make his mother hold him closer. And 11, Jane, as she's learning to be called, exists in a space between worlds. Hidden away in a small cabin deep in the woods, she lives with Jim Hopper, the gruff police chief who has become an unlikely father figure. Their days follow a peaceful routine: breakfast together, lessons in reading and writing, quiet evenings by the fireplace. It's a simple life, far from the chaos she once knew. As autumn deepens and the days grow shorter, strange things begin to stir in Hawkins once again. But these mysteries unfold slowly, like a dream you're trying to remember, each detail emerging softly from the mist of ordinary life. Will experiences what the doctors call episodes, moments where the world around him shifts and changes, revealing glimpses of a darker place. These visions come over him like waves of sleep, sudden and encompassing. In these moments he sees the town he loves transformed into something shadowy and cold, where ash falls like snow and the sky burns with an otherworldly fire. But between these episodes, Will finds peace. He talks with his friends about their latest campaign, laughs at Dustin's jokes, and slowly learns to navigate this strange new chapter of his life. His mother Joyce and his brother Jonathan wrap him in love and protection, creating a safe harbor in the storm of his changing world. Meanwhile, in the depths of Hawkins National Laboratory, Dr. Sam Owens has taken charge. Unlike his predecessor, Dr. Owens carries himself with a gentler authority. He genuinely cares for Will's well-being, monitoring the boy's condition with the dedication of someone who has seen too much to dismiss any possibility. In the woods surrounding Hawkins, Hopper and 11 have created their own little universe. She calls him Papa now, this man who brings her Eggo waffles and teaches her about the world beyond laboratory walls. Their cabin is filled with quiet moments, Hopper reading the newspaper while 11 practices her reading, both of them finding healing in this simple domesticity. Dustin's discovery begins, as many great adventures do, with curiosity and a touch of rebellion. In his family's trash can he finds something extraordinary, a a small slug-like creature that he decides to keep as a pet. He names it D'Artagnan, after the musketeer, and creates a terrarium for his new friend with the care of someone tending a garden. The creature is beautiful in its strangeness, with soft petal-like features that open and close like a flower breathing. Dustin feeds it nougat and watches it grow with the wonder of a child discovering magic. But as D'Artagnan grows larger, something wild and primal stirs within the creature. This discovery leads Dustin on a gentle quest to understand what he's found. He seeks out his science teacher, Miss Lark, who provides patient explanations about the natural world. Their conversations are filled with the kind of wonder that makes learning feel like bedtime stories, tales of biology and evolution told with passion and care. In Hawkins, new stories begin to weave themselves into the familiar tapestry of the town. Bob Newby, a kind-hearted man with gentle eyes and an infectious enthusiasm for life, has found love with Joyce Byer. Bob brings lightness to Joyce's world. He talks about moving to Maine, about starting fresh somewhere peaceful where the past can't reach them. Bob's presence in the Byers household creates moments of pure domestic bliss. He helps Will with his homework, brings flowers to Joyce, and dreams aloud about a future filled with simple pleasures. His love for Joyce and Will is uncomplicated and pure, like morning sunlight streaming through clean windows. At the same time, Nancy Wheeler finds herself caught between two worlds: the familiar comfort of her relationship with Steve Harrington, and the intense connection she feels with Jonathan Byer. Steve, with his perfectly styled hair and growing maturity, tries to be the boyfriend Nancy deserves, while Jonathan offers her something deeper, understanding born from shared trauma and love. Their love triangle unfolds with the gentle inevitability of seasons changing, each moment of connection and disconnection feeling as natural as breathing, as Will's episodes become more frequent and intense. The barrier between our world and the Upside Down begins to thin, but this darkness approaches slowly, like twilight falling over a peaceful day, giving our heroes time to prepare and come together. Will's visions reveal a vast shadow creature, the Mind Flayer, ancient and patient, spreading its influence through the dark dimension like ink through water. This entity moves with purpose, but without haste, its tendrils reaching across dimensional boundaries with the persistence of ivy, climbing a wall. Owens and his team monitor Will carefully, their concern growing as they realize that the boy's connection to the Upside Down is deeper than anyone imagined. But their care for Will is genuine, creating a support system that holds him safe even as the danger grows. In the laboratory's white halls, scientists work quietly and methodically, their research feeling more like meditation than frantic investigation. They study samples and readings with the patience of scholars, each discovery bringing them closer to understanding the mystery that surrounds their small town. While the others face their challenges in Hawkins, Eleven embarks on her own gentle journey of discovery. Restless in her forest sanctuary, she uses her abilities to reach out and find others like her. Her search leads her to discover her sister, 8, another child from the laboratory's experiment. Eleven's journey to Chicago unfolds like a dream sequence, each moment filled with the wonder of a young person discovering the wider world. She sees the city's lights, experiences its energy, and for the first time truly understands how vast the world beyond Hawkins really is. 8. Carly has gathered other outcasts around her, creating a found family bound by shared trauma and a desire for justice. But their version of justice feels too harsh for Eleven's gentle heart. She learns about anger and revenge, but ultimately chooses love and protection over retribution. In quiet moments with Carly's group, Eleven discovers parts of herself she never knew existed. She learns about her mother, Terry Ives, and begins to understand the larger story of her origins. These revelations come slowly, gently, like puzzle pieces falling into place in her mind. Beneath Hawkins, a vast network of tunnels spreads like the root system of some enormous tree. These passages, carved by creatures from the Upside Down, create a hidden world beneath the familiar streets and buildings of the town. Hopper discovers this underground maze during his investigation, and his exploration feels like a journey through a living organism. The walls pulse with organic life, and the air carries the whisper of something vast and ancient, stirring to wakefulness. When Hopper becomes trapped in these tunnels, his experience takes on an almost meditative quality. Lost in the darkness, he must rely on his instincts and experience to survive, each decision carrying the weight of his love for 11 and his determination to protect Hawkins. Joyce and Bob join the search for Hopper, their love driving them into danger with the certainty of people who have found something worth protecting. Bob's technical expertise becomes crucial as they navigate the laboratory's security systems, his gentle nature proving stronger than any violence. As Halloween approaches, the boundary between dimensions grows thin, and the Mind Flayer's influence spreads through Will. Like a gentle but persistent fever, the boy struggles to maintain his identity while this ancient entity slowly takes residence in his mind. The adults around Will work together with increasing urgency, but their efforts feel more like a caring medical team than a military operation. Dr. Owens coordinates their response with the calm competence of someone who genuinely cares about his patient's well-being. Steve Harrington finds himself drawn into the group's efforts, his character growing stronger through his desire to protect the children he's come to care for. His relationship with Dustin develops into something beautiful, an older brother figure helping guide a younger friend through danger. The Demodogs, creatures from the Upside Down, begin to emerge in greater numbers, but even these monsters feel less like agents of terror and more like symptoms of a larger imbalance that needs healing. In the climactic moments of their adventure, our heroes must make difficult choices, but they face these challenges together, their bonds stronger than any darkness they encounter. Bob Newby becomes a true hero in these final hours, his love for Joyce and Will driving him to acts of incredible bravery. His sacrifice feels both tragic and beautiful, a reminder that heroism often comes from the gentlest heart. 11 returns to Hawkins just when she's needed most, leaving behind her exploration of the wider world to save the place and people she truly calls home. Her return feels like the completion of a circle, bringing her story back to where it began, but with new wisdom and strength. The battle against the Mind Flayer becomes less about violence and more about healing, closing the doorway between worlds, severing Will's connection to the darkness, and restoring balance to their small corner of the universe. As the adventure concludes, Hawkins begins to heal. Will recovers slowly but surely, supported by the love of his family and friends. His art becomes brighter, his smiles more frequent, and his connection to the normal world grows stronger each day. The laboratory is shut down, its dark experiments finally ended. Dr. Owens, true to his word, helps create new identities for 11, giving her the chance to live a normal life. The paperwork that makes her officially Jane Hopper feels like magic in its own way. Bureaucracy transformed into an act of love and protection. Hopper and 11's relationship deepens as they learn to navigate the complexities of being a real family. Their cabin in the woods becomes a true home, filled with laughter, learning, and the simple pleasures of domestic life. The boys' friendship remains strong, their shared adventures creating bonds that will last a lifetime. They continue their D&D campaigns, but now their imaginary quests pale in comparison to the real adventures they've shared. The season concludes with the Hawkins Middle School snowball, a perfect metaphor for new beginnings and the gentle passage of time. The gymnasium, decorated with streamers and soft lights, becomes a place of magic where our young heroes can simply be children again. Nancy gives Steve closure with kindness, allowing both of them to move forward without bitterness. Steve finds new purpose in his role as protector and friend. To the younger kids, his character growth complete and beautiful. Jonathan and Nancy find each other at last, their connection deepened by shared experiences and genuine understanding. Their first dance together feels like the resolution of a long, patient song. Most beautifully of all, 11, Jane attends her first school dance. Hopper has taught her to dance in their living room, and now she gets to use those skills in the real world. When Mike sees her there, transformed and radiant in her simple dress. Their reunion feels like the answer to every prayer either of them has ever whispered. As they dance together in the soft gymnasium lights, surrounded by their friends and the gentle chatter of their classmates, everything feels exactly as it should be. The darkness has been pushed back, the monsters defeated, and love has triumphed over fear. And so our story comes to its gentle close, just as sleep comes to the town of Hawkins. On this peaceful night, the streets are quiet now, bathed in soft streetlight and moonbeams. In houses throughout the town, our heroes sleep soundly, their dreams filled with hope rather than fear. Will Byers sleeps peacefully in his bed, his latest artwork, a beautiful drawing of his friends, pinned to the wall beside him. His breathing is steady and calm, no longer troubled by visions from another world. Mike Wheeler dreams of dancing, of Eleven's smile, of adventures yet to come that will be filled with wonder rather than terror. Dustin Henderson sleeps with a book about exotic animals beside his pillow, still curious about the natural world but no longer harboring creatures that don't belong in our dimension. Lucas Sinclair rests easy, his basketball beside his bed, dreaming of perfect shots and victories both on the court and in life. Steve Harrington sleeps the sleep of someone who has found his true purpose, his hair still perfect even in slumber, his heart full of affection for the kids he's sworn to protect. Jonathan and Nancy sleep in their separate homes, but with matching smiles, their hearts connected across the quiet streets of Hawkins. And in a cabin deep in the woods, Hopper and Eleven, Jane sleep as father and daughter, their little family complete and safe. The Christmas lights they've strung around their living room cast gentle patterns on the walls, and the fire in their fireplace burns low and warm. The Upside Down remains sealed away, its darkness held at bay by love and sacrifice, and the simple power of people choosing to care for one another. The Mind Flayer waits in its shadowy realm, but for now, it cannot reach across the boundaries that separate our world. As golden October light filters through the trees of Hawkins, we find our heroes adjusting to life after their incredible ordeal. Mike Wheeler sits in his familiar basement, surrounded by the warm glow of campaign maps and dice. The Dungeons & Dragons adventures continue, providing comfort in routine and the safety of imagination. But something has changed in Will Byers. Our brave young friend who survived the impossible now experiences what he calls episodes, moments where the world shifts around him like a waking dream. In these gentle but unsettling visions, he sees Hawkins transformed into a darker place, where storm clouds gather in unnatural colors and strange particles drift through the air like snow. These episodes wash over Will like waves, sudden but not violent, leaving him disoriented but not afraid. He's learned to navigate these moments with the patience of someone much older, supported by the unwavering love of his mother Joyce and brother Jonathan. Dr. Sam Owens, the new scientist overseeing Will's care, approaches his work with genuine compassion. Unlike his predecessor, Dr. Owens treats Will not as a test subject, but as a patient deserving of care and understanding. His voice is calm and reassuring as he explains to Joyce that they're monitoring Will carefully, creating a safety net of protection around the boy. Meanwhile, in a small cabin hidden deep in the woods, Eleven lives a quiet life with Chief Jim Hopper. She's learning to be Jane Hopper now, practicing her reading with children's books and learning about the world through old television shows. Their daily routine has become a gentle dance of domestic life, Hopper making coffee while Eleven practices writing her name, both finding healing in these simple moments. Dustin Henderson returns from summer camp with all the enthusiasm of youth and a mysterious discovery that will change everything. In his family's trash can, he finds a small, otherworldly creature that he decides to keep as a pet. He names it D'Artagnan, after the brave musketeer, and creates a loving home for it in his bedroom. The creature is strangely beautiful, with petal-like features that open and close like a flower breathing. Dustin feeds it nougat bars and watches with wonder as it grows larger each day. His care for this unusual pet reflects his generous heart. He sees beauty and potential friendship where others might see danger. At Hawkins Middle School, Life continues with the comfortable rhythms of teenage existence. Lucas practices basketball with dedication, the steady bounce of the ball creating a meditative rhythm. Nancy Wheeler navigates the complex world of high school relationships, caught between her history with Steve Harrington and her growing connection to Jonathan Byrne. Steve himself has begun an unexpected transformation. The popular boy with perfect hair is slowly becoming something deeper, someone who cares more about protecting others than maintaining his social status. His relationship with Nancy becomes a gentle exploration of who they both want to become. In the Byers household, a new presence brings light and laughter. Bob Newby, Joyce's kind-hearted boyfriend, fills their home with warmth and optimism. Bob dreams of simple pleasures, moving to Maine, starting fresh somewhere peaceful, building a life filled with ordinary happiness. His love for Joyce and Will is uncomplicated and pure, like morning sunlight streaming through clean windows. As autumn deepens, Will's episodes become more frequent and intense. In his visions, he sees a vast shadow creature moving through the dark dimension, the Mind Flayer, ancient and patient, spreading its influence like ink through water. This entity doesn't rush or rage. It moves with the inevitability of changing seasons, its presence both alien and strangely hypnotic. The Mind Flayer exists beyond our understanding of time and space, a being of shadow and thought that has noticed our world and found it interesting. Its attention feels less like anger and more like curiosity, the way a scientist might observe a fascinating specimen. Dr. Owens and his team monitor Will's condition with growing concern but never panic. Their work feels methodical and caring, like doctors tending to a patient with a rare but manageable condition. The laboratory has become a place of healing rather than experimentation, its white halls filled with genuine dedication to Will's well-being. Joyce watches her son with the fierce protectiveness of a mother who has already lost him once and refuses to let it happen again. But her vigilance is tempered by hope that Dr. Owens is different, that this time the adults will find a way to help rather than harm. Jonathan supports his family with quiet strength, his camera now capturing moments of joy rather than evidence of tragedy. His photographs tell the story of a family learning to heal, each image a testament to resilience and love. Restless in her forest sanctuary, 11 uses her abilities to reach out beyond Hawkins, searching for others like her. Her psychic exploration leads her to discover a sister, 8, another number from Hawkins' lab's cruel experiments. This discovery sets 11 on a journey to Chicago, her first real venture into the wider world. The city overwhelms her senses at first. So many lights, so many minds, so much life, pulsing through concrete and steel. But gradually, she learns to navigate this new environment with the same courage that helped her survive the laboratory. 8, who calls herself Kali, has gathered other outcasts around her, creating a found family bound by shared trauma and a desire for justice. But their version of justice feels harsh to 11's gentle heart. She learns about anger and revenge, emotions she's never fully explored, but ultimately chooses a different path. In quiet moments with Kali's group, 11 discovers parts of herself she never knew existed. She learns about her mother, Terry Ives, visiting the broken woman who gave birth to her and gave up everything trying to find her. These meetings are heartbreaking but healing, helping 11 understand her origins and the love that preceded her existence. Through her time away from Hawkins, 11 grows stronger, not just in her abilities, but in her understanding of who she wants to be. She realizes that home isn't just a place, it's the people who love you and need you, waiting for your return. As Dustin's pet grows larger, its true nature begins to emerge. D'Artagnan transforms from a seemingly harmless creature into something more complex. A demodog, a creature from the upside down, that carries both beauty and danger in its alien form. But Dustin's love for his pet doesn't waver immediately. He continues caring for the creature, even as it outgrows its terrarium, even as it begins displaying behaviors that should frighten him. His dedication speaks to the purity of his heart. He sees the good in everything, even when that optimism might be dangerous. The transformation happens gradually, like watching a caterpillar become a butterfly, except this metamorphosis reveals something wild and primal rather than delicate and beautiful. D'Artagnan's features sharpen, its appetite grows more demanding, and its connection to the shadow realm becomes impossible to ignore. When the truth about D'Artagnan's nature finally becomes clear, Dustin faces his first real heartbreak. The creature he loved and nurtured was never truly a pet. It was a harbinger of something larger and more dangerous, approaching Hawkins. Beneath the familiar streets of Hawkins, a vast network of tunnels spreads like the root system of some enormous tree. These passages, carved by creatures from the upside down, create a hidden world that mirrors the town above in shadow and decay. Hopper discovers this underground maze during his investigation, and his exploration feels like a journey through a living organism. The walls pulse with organic life, and the air carries whispers of something vast, stirring to wakefulness. His flashlight cuts through darkness that seems almost alive, revealing corridors that stretch beyond sight. When Hopper becomes lost in these tunnels, his experience takes on an almost meditative quality. Trapped in the darkness, he must rely on his instincts and experience to survive, each decision carrying the weight of his love for Eleven and his determination to protect Hawkins. The tunnels themselves tell a story. They're not random but purposeful, connecting key locations throughout Hawkins like arteries in a vast body. They represent the Mind Flayer's growing influence, its ability to touch and corrupt the world above through these underground pathways. Joyce and Bob join the desperate search for Hopper, their love driving them into danger with the certainty of people who have found something worth protecting. Bob's technical expertise becomes crucial as they navigate the laboratory's security systems, his gentle nature proving stronger than any violence when faced with real crisis. As Halloween approaches, the barrier between dimensions grows thin, and the Mind Flayer's influence spreads through Will like a gentle but persistent fever. The ancient entity doesn't invade Will's mind so much as it gradually makes itself at home there, settling in like a long-term guest who slowly takes over the house. Will struggles to maintain his identity while this presence grows stronger within him. He experiences moments of clarity where he's completely himself, alternating with periods where something else looks through his eyes and speaks with his voice. The adults around Will work with increasing urgency but never panic. Owens coordinates their response with the calm competence of someone who genuinely cares about his patient's well-being. Joyce holds her son close, whispering reassurances and love even when she's not sure he can hear. Jonathan documents everything with his camera, creating a record not of horror but of love, images of a family refusing to give up, of friends standing together against impossible odds, of ordinary people choosing to be extraordinary when the world needs them most. The Mind Flayer's presence in Will creates a bridge between worlds, allowing it to see through the boy's eyes and understand the nature of our reality. But this connection works both ways. Through Will, our heroes gain insight into their enemies' plans and weaknesses. As the crisis deepens, unlikely alliances form throughout Hawkins. Steve Harrington finds himself drawn into the group's efforts, his character growth complete as he fully embraces his role as protector rather than popular kid. His relationship with Dustin develops into something beautiful, an older brother figure helping guide a younger friend through danger. Nancy and Jonathan's partnership deepens beyond romance into true collaboration. They work together with the focused intensity of people who have found their purpose, their different skills complementing each other perfectly. At the laboratory, Owens makes the difficult decision to put Will's well-being above all other considerations, even if it means potentially losing valuable research opportunities. His choice represents hope, the possibility that some adults can learn from past mistakes and choose compassion over ambition. The children, Mike, Lucas, Dustin, and Max, the new girl who has joined their group, face their fears with the same courage they've always shown. But this time, they're not alone. Adults believe them, support them, and fight alongside them rather than dismissing their concerns or trying to protect them by keeping them ignorant. The Mind Flayer reveals its true plan, not conquest through violence, but integration through connection. It seeks to merge our world with the Upside Down, creating a reality where it can exist comfortably, while transforming everything familiar into something alien. This revelation comes not through dramatic confrontation, but through careful observation and deduction. Will, in his moments of clarity, provides crucial intelligence about the entity's nature and intentions. His bravery in maintaining his identity despite the Mind Flayer's influence becomes the key to their resistance. The creature's plan unfolds with terrible logic. It will use Will as an anchor point, gradually expanding its influence until the barriers between dimensions collapse entirely. But this same connection that makes Will vulnerable also makes him powerful, giving him the ability to feed false information to the entity when the moment is right. Bob Newby emerges as an unexpected hero during the laboratory's evacuation. His knowledge of the building's systems and his determination to save Joyce and her family drive him to acts of incredible bravery. His heroism feels both tragic and beautiful, a reminder that courage often comes from the gentlest heart. The Demodogs, creatures like D'Artagnan but fully mature, begin to emerge throughout Hawkins, but they move with purpose rather than random destruction. They're not monsters in the traditional sense, but rather symptoms of a larger imbalance that needs healing. Just when hope seems lost, 11 returns to Hawkins, leaving behind her exploration of the wider world to save the place and people she truly calls home. Her arrival feels like the completion of a circle, bringing her story back to where it began, but with new wisdom and strength. Her reunion with Mike and the others carries all the emotional weight of a year's separation, compressed into a few perfect moments. Words become unnecessary. Their connection transcends language, communicating in glances and gestures, and the simple presence of being together again. Eleven's growth during her time away becomes immediately apparent. She's not just more powerful, but more centered, more certain of who she is and what she's capable of. Her abilities have evolved beyond mere telekinesis, into something approaching true understanding of the forces that connect all things. Working together, 11 and Hopper prepare for what they know will be a difficult battle, but their relationship has deepened during their time together in the cabin. They operate now as true family, each understanding the other's strengths and weaknesses. The plan they develop focuses not on destruction, but on healing, closing the doorway between worlds, severing Will's connection to the Mind Flayer, and restoring balance to their small corner of the universe. The climactic confrontation takes place on multiple fronts, but feels more like a careful medical procedure than a violent battle. Each action is measured, purposeful, designed to heal rather than harm. 11 ventures into the Upside Down to close the gate, her journey through that shadow realm both terrifying and strangely peaceful. The dark dimension responds to her presence, not with hostility but with something approaching respect, recognizing in her a power equal to its own. Meanwhile, Joyce, Jonathan, and Nancy work to free Will from the Mind Flayer's influence, through a process that's part exorcism, part medical intervention. They surround him with heat and light, forcing the shadow creature to retreat from his body like darkness fleeing before dawn. Will's liberation doesn't come through violence, but through love, the combined determination of everyone who cares about him proving stronger than any alien intelligence. His return to himself feels like watching someone wake from a long, troubled dream. The Mind Flayer's defeat is not a destruction, but a separation. It returns to its own realm, no longer able to bridge the gap between worlds. The entity's retreat feels almost dignified, like an ancient force acknowledging that this particular battle has been lost. Steve, armed with his nail-studded baseball bat, protects the younger kids with fierce determination, but even his fighting feels more protective than aggressive. He's become the guardian he was always meant to be, his growth from selfish teenager to selfless protector, now complete. As the immediate crisis passes, Hawkins begins the slow process of healing. Will recovers gradually but surely, supported by the love of his family and friends. His connection to the Upside Down fades like a bad dream, leaving only memories and the hard-won wisdom that comes from surviving the impossible. The laboratory closes its doors permanently, its dark experiments finally ended. Owens, true to his word, helps create new identities for 11, giving her the chance to live a normal life. The paperwork that makes her officially Jane Hopper feels like magic in its own way, bureaucracy transformed into an act of love and protection. Hopper and Eleven's relationship continues to deepen as they learn to navigate the complexities of being a real family. Their cabin in the woods becomes a true home, filled with laughter, learning, and the simple pleasures of domestic life. Hopper teaches her to drive, helps her with homework, and slowly introduces her to the wider world at her own pace. Bob's sacrifice is mourned throughout Hawkins, his memory becoming a symbol of quiet heroism and the power of ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Joyce carries his love with her as she continues rebuilding her life, honoring his memory by embracing the hope he always embodied. The friendship between our young heroes remains unshakable, their shared adventures creating bonds that will last a lifetime. They continue their D&D campaigns, but now their imaginary quests pale in comparison to the real adventures they've shared and survived together. The season concludes with the Hawkins Middle School Snowball, a perfect metaphor for new beginnings and the gentle passage of time. The gymnasium, transformed with streamers and soft lights, becomes a place of magic where our young heroes can simply be children again. Nancy gives Steve closure with kindness and grace, allowing both of them to move forward without bitterness or regret. Their conversation is mature and loving, acknowledging what they meant to each other while accepting that they've grown in different directions. Steve finds new purpose in his role as protector and friend to the younger kids, his character transformation complete and beautiful. He chaperones the dance with genuine pleasure, taking pride in seeing his kids happy and safe. Jonathan and Nancy find each other at last, their connection deepened by shared experiences and genuine understanding. Their first dance together feels like the resolution of a long, patient song, two people who have finally found their way to each other. But the most magical moment belongs to 11, Jane, attending her first school dance. Hopper has taught her to dance in their living room, patient lessons that become precious memories. Now she gets to use those skills in the real world, stepping into the gymnasium like she's entering a fairy tale. When Mike sees her there, transformed and radiant in her simple but elegant dress, their reunion feels like the answer to every prayer either of them has ever whispered. Their dance together in the soft gymnasium lights represents everything the story has been building toward: love triumphing over fear, hope surviving impossibility, and the simple truth that home is wherever the people you love are waiting for you. As our story draws to its gentle close, peace settles over Hawkins like a warm blanket. The streets are quiet now, bathed in soft streetlight and gentle moonbeams. In houses throughout the town, our heroes sleep soundly, their dreams filled with hope rather than fear. Will Byers rests peacefully in his bed, his latest artwork, a beautiful drawing of his friends gathered around their D&D table, pinned to the wall beside him. His breathing is steady and calm, no longer troubled by visions from another world. The Mind Flayer's influence has faded completely, leaving only the strong, brave boy he was always meant to be. Mike Wheeler dreams of dancing, of 11's radiant smile, of adventures yet to come that will be filled with wonder rather than terror. His basement remains the heart of their group, a safe space where imagination and friendship create their own magic. Dustin Henderson sleeps with a book about real animals beside his pillow, still curious about the natural world, but more careful now about what he chooses to bring home. His gap-toothed grin relaxes in sleep, his generous heart at peace. Lucas Sinclair rests easy, his basketball beside his bed, dreaming of perfect shots and victories both on the court and in life. His loyalty to his friends remains unwavering, a steady foundation they can always count on. Steve Harrington sleeps the sleep of someone who has found his true purpose, his famous hair still perfect even in slumber, his heart full of genuine affection for the kids he's sworn to protect. His transformation from selfish teenager to selfless guardian is complete. Nancy Wheeler dreams of Jonathan, of the future they might build together, of using her intelligence and determination to make the world a better place. Her courage has been tested and proven true. Jonathan Byers sleeps surrounded by photographs that tell the story of love triumphing over loss, his camera now capturing joy instead of sorrow. His quiet strength continues to anchor his family. Joyce Byers rests at last, no longer needing to fight monsters or navigate impossible bureaucracy. Her boys are safe, her love has proven stronger than any darkness, and tomorrow holds the promise of ordinary happiness. And in a cabin deep in the woods, Hopper and 11 Jane sleep as father and daughter, their little family complete and safe. The Christmas lights they've strung around their living room cast gentle patterns on the walls, and the fire in their fireplace burns low and warm. Hopper snores softly in his chair, and 11 curls up on the couch with a book, both of them exactly where they belong. The Upside Down remains sealed away, its darkness held at bay by love and sacrifice, and the simple power of people choosing to care for one another. The Mind Flayer waits in its shadowy realm, but it can no longer reach across the boundaries that separate our world. The gate is closed, the balance restored. As Halloween approaches in Hawkins, something stirs in the shadows beyond our world. The investigation into last year's strange events has revealed troubling signs. The Demogorgon may not have been acting alone. In the quiet offices of Hawkins National Laboratory, scientists pore over data with growing concern, their voices hushed as they discuss findings that suggest something far more sinister lurks in the darkness between dimensions. Chief Jim Hopper walks through the empty corridors of the lab, his footsteps echoing softly against sterile walls. The fluorescent lights cast everything in a gentle, dreamlike glow as he examines evidence that points to a larger threat. Documents scattered across tables tell a story of connections they're only beginning to understand. Patterns that suggest the Demogorgon was merely a scout, a harbinger of something vast and ancient, stirring in the shadow realm. Sam Owens, the new overseer of the facility, speaks in measured tones about their discoveries. His voice carries the weight of someone who has seen too much, yet maintains the calm professionalism of a scientist, dedicated to understanding rather than exploiting. He explains to Hopper how their instruments have detected ripples in the fabric between worlds, disturbances that pulse with an almost heartbeat-like rhythm. Meanwhile, Will Byers sits quietly in his bedroom, sketching images that flow from his mind like memories of dreams. His pencil moves across paper with gentle precision, creating pictures of a towering shadow that seems to watch from beyond the veil of reality. These aren't nightmares, they're visions, glimpses of something that calls itself the Shadow Monster, an entity of pure darkness that commands legions of creatures from the Upside Down. In a small cabin deep in the woods, 11 practices her abilities under Hopper's watchful eye. But as she explores the depths of her psychic powers, she begins to sense echoes of something familiar yet terrifying. Through her connection to the psychic realm, she feels the presence of the Shadow Monster like a cold wind across her consciousness. The government's experiments on 11 had created more than just telekinetic abilities. They had opened doorways in her mind, pathways that the Shadow Monster can sense and follow. Brenner's cruel tests had left psychic scars that now serve as beacons, drawing the attention of entities from beyond our world. As she sits in the cabin's warm glow, 11 realizes that her past is intimately connected to the growing threat facing Hawkins. Through gentle meditation and careful exploration of her memories, 11 begins to understand the true scope of what was done to her. The sensory deprivation tank hadn't just enhanced her powers, it had thinned the barriers between dimensions in her mind, creating a permanent link to the shadow realm. Every time she uses her abilities, she sends ripples through the psychic fabric that the Shadow Monster can feel and follow. Hopper watches over her with paternal concern, his gruff exterior softening as he sees the weight of responsibility settling on her young shoulders. Together they work through old files and documents, piecing together the connection between her abilities and the interdimensional threat. The truth emerges slowly, like dawn breaking over a troubled landscape. As the investigation deepens, Our heroes discover that the Demogorgon was never the true threat. It was merely a puppet, controlled by something far more intelligent and malevolent. The Shadow Monster, also known as the Mind Flayer, exists as a vast consciousness of pure psychic energy, spreading its influence across dimensions like a spider spinning webs between worlds. Through Will's increasingly vivid visions, the group learns that the Shadow Monster has been studying our world for longer than anyone realized. It feeds on psychic energy and seeks to merge our reality with the Upside Down, creating a hybrid dimension where it can exist comfortably while transforming everything familiar into something alien and dark. Owens explains to the gathered team that the creature operates on a level beyond physical existence. It's a living network of consciousness that can inhabit and control other beings. The Demogorgons they've encountered are just extensions of its will, biological tools it uses to interact with physical reality. But its true power lies in its ability to possess and corrupt living minds, turning victims into unwilling servants of its dark purpose. Mike, Dustin, and Lucas gather in the Wheeler basement, their usual D&D campaigns taking on new urgency as they realize their fictional adventures pale in comparison to the real threat facing their town. They study maps and theories, trying to understand how an entity of pure thought and malice could threaten their physical world. As the truth about the Shadow Monster spreads among our heroes, each member of the group grapples with their own fears and responsibilities. Nancy Wheeler finds herself torn between her desire for a normal teenage life and her knowledge that supernatural forces threaten everything she holds dear. Her relationship with Steve becomes strained as she struggles to protect him from truths too dangerous to share. Jonathan Byers channels his anxiety into his photography, documenting strange phenomena around Hawkins with the dedication of a war correspondent. His camera captures subtle signs of the Shadow Monster's growing influence: dead trees arranged in unnatural patterns, animals behaving strangely, and shadows that seem to move independently of their sources. Joyce Byers, still protective of Will after their previous ordeal, begins to notice changes in her son that go beyond normal trauma recovery. His drawings become more detailed and disturbing, depicting not just the Shadow Monster, but intricate maps of some vast underground network. She realizes that Will's connection to the Upside Down may be deeper and more permanent than anyone initially understood. Steve Harrington, despite being kept in the dark about the supernatural aspects of their situation, senses the growing tension among his friends. His protective instincts kick in as he notices Nancy's increasing distraction and the way the younger kids seem to be carrying burdens too heavy for their age. Dustin makes a discovery that changes everything: a small creature he names D'Artagnan, which he initially believes to be a new species, but which the others recognize as a baby Demogorgon. His attachment to the creature creates conflict within the group, as they debate whether it can be safely contained or if it represents an immediate threat to their community. Through painstaking investigation and recovered memories, the full scope of the government's experiments on 11 becomes clear. Brenner's program hadn't just been about creating psychic weapons, it had been an attempt to breach the barriers between dimensions and harness the power that existed in the spaces between worlds. 11 learns that she wasn't the only subject in these experiments. Other children numbered like her were subjected to similar tortures in the pursuit of psychic abilities. Some didn't survive the process, while others, like 8, Cowley, escaped to live as fugitives in the outside world. Each successful subject created another potential doorway that entities like the Shadow Monster could exploit. The revelation that her very existence makes her a target weighs heavily on 11's mind. She realizes that by living in Hawkins, she's putting everyone she cares about in danger. The Shadow Monster doesn't just want to invade our world, it specifically wants her, recognizing her as both a threat to its plans and a valuable asset it could use to expand its influence. Hopper helps her process these revelations, his own past as a father giving him insight into her emotional needs. Together they explore the abandoned sections of Hawkins' lab, uncovering evidence of experiments that go back decades. They find records of previous breaches, earlier encounters with creatures from the Upside Down, and a pattern of government cover-ups that stretches back to the Cold War. The investigation leads to a startling discovery. Beneath Hawkins lies a vast network of tunnels, not carved by human hands, but grown like organic passages by creatures serving the shadow monster. These tunnels form a mirror image of the town above, creating a parallel infrastructure that the entity can use to move its servants undetected. Hopper's exploration of these tunnels reveals their true purpose. They're not just passages, but living extensions of the shadow monster's consciousness, allowing it to extend its influence throughout the area like a vast nervous system. The walls pulse with bioluminescent patterns that seem to respond to his presence, suggesting an intelligence that pervades the entire network. Will's visions provide crucial intelligence about the tunnel system's layout and purpose. Through his unwilling connection to the shadow monster, he sees how the creature plans to use these passages to launch a coordinated invasion of the surface world. But his ability to share information comes at a cost. Each vision leaves him more vulnerable to the entity's influence. Owens coordinates with Hopper to map the tunnel system, their combined efforts revealing that the network extends far beyond Hawkins. Satellite imagery and seismic data suggest similar structures exist beneath other locations where government psychic experiments were conducted, indicating that the shadow monster's influence is far more widespread than initially believed. As the shadow monster's power grows, it begins to exert direct control over Will, using him as a window into our world and a puppet through which it can act. The possession unfolds gradually, like a slow-acting poison that corrupts from within. Will fights against the intrusion with remarkable courage, but the entity's influence proves overwhelming. Joyce and Jonathan watch helplessly as Will struggles to maintain his identity, while something else speaks through his voice and looks through his eyes. The shadow monster's presence transforms him into a living spy, gathering intelligence about their defenses and plans while pretending to be the boy they love. Owens attempts to study the possession from a scientific perspective, monitoring Will's vital signs and brain activity as the entity gains control. His readings reveal that the shadow monster exists partially outside normal space-time, making it nearly impossible to combat through conventional means. The group realizes that the shadow monster isn't just possessing Will, it's learning from him, absorbing his memories and experiences to better understand human nature and society. Through Will's eyes, it studies their weaknesses and develops strategies for converting other humans to its cause. Recognizing that she may be the only one capable of confronting the shadow monster directly, 11 makes the difficult decision to face the entity in the psychic realm, where it primarily exists. This confrontation requires her to enter a deep meditative state, leaving her physical body vulnerable while her consciousness travels to the dimension between worlds. Hopper and the others create a safe space for her to attempt this psychic battle, surrounding her with protection while she ventures into realms beyond human understanding. The cabin becomes a fortress of love and determination, its warm light standing against the growing darkness outside. In the psychic realm, 11 encounters the shadow monster in its true form, a vast entity of pure malevolence that spans multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their battle is not one of physical force but of will and intention, each trying to impose their vision of reality on the fabric of existence itself. The confrontation reveals that the shadow monster feeds on fear and despair, growing stronger when its victims lose hope. 11 realizes that defeating it requires not just power but the opposite of what it represents: love, connection, and the refusal to surrender to darkness, even in the face of overwhelming odds. As the shadow monster's influence reaches its peak, it launches a coordinated assault on Hawkins, using possessed humans and demogorgon creatures to attack simultaneously from multiple directions. The town becomes a battlefield where ordinary citizens find themselves fighting for their very reality. Steve Harrington finally learns the truth about the supernatural threat and immediately steps up to protect the younger members of the group. His transformation from selfish teenager to selfless protector reaches its culmination as he faces down creatures from another dimension with nothing but a baseball bat and fierce determination. Nancy and Jonathan work together to evacuate civilians and coordinate resistance efforts, their partnership strengthened by shared purpose and mutual trust. They move through the chaos with practiced efficiency, having learned from their previous encounters with the supernatural. The government forces led by Dr. Owens attempt to contain the outbreak using conventional military tactics, but quickly realize that their weapons are largely ineffective against entities that exist partially outside normal reality. The battle becomes one of survival rather than victory, with success measured by how many people they can save rather than how many enemies they can defeat. In the climactic confrontation, Eleven's psychic battle with the shadow monster reaches its crescendo, but victory doesn't come through superior power. It comes through her connections to the people she loves, and their unwavering faith in her. Mike, Hopper, Joyce, and the others pour their support into her through bonds that transcend physical distance. Will, still partially possessed but fighting for control, provides crucial assistance by feeding false information to the shadow monster at the critical moment. His courage in resisting the entity's influence even while it inhabits his mind becomes the key to their success. The shadow monster's defeat is not a destruction but a banishment. The entity is forced back into its own realm, and the barriers between dimensions are reinforced. The tunnels beneath Hawkins collapse, severing the creature's connection to our world, though the knowledge that it still exists somewhere beyond our reality lingers like a distant storm cloud. In the aftermath of their victory, Hawkins begins the slow process of healing. Will gradually recovers from his possession, his connection to the Upside Down finally severed by Eleven's sacrifice, and the community's love. His art returns to depicting normal subjects, friends, family, and the simple beauty of everyday life. The government acknowledges the truth about their experiments, with Dr. Owens working to ensure that Eleven can live a normal life without fear of recapture or exploitation. Official documents are created, giving her a legal identity as Jane Hopper, allowing her to attend school and experience the childhood that was stolen from her. Hopper and Eleven's relationship deepens as they learn to be a real family, their bond forged in shared danger now growing through shared peace. The cabin in the woods becomes a true home, filled with laughter, learning, and the simple pleasures of domestic life. The season concludes with the Hawkins Middle School Snowball, where our young heroes can finally experience normal teenage concerns, like dancing, friendship, and the gentle awkwardness of growing up. The gymnasium, decorated with streamers and soft lights, becomes a symbol of hope and normalcy restored. Mike and Eleven dance together for the first time, their reunion after so much struggle feeling like the resolution of a beautiful symphony. Around them, their friends find their own moments of happiness. Dustin's confidence blooms, Lucas discovers new courage, and even Steve finds purpose in his role as protector and mentor. Nancy and Jonathan's relationship finally finds its footing, built on mutual respect and shared experiences that have shown them both who they truly are. Their dance together represents not just romance but partnership, two people who have chosen to face whatever comes next as a team. As the evening winds down and the music fades to gentle echoes, Hawkins settles into a peaceful rhythm. The shadow monster remains banished, the government's harmful experiments have ended, and our heroes have earned their chance at normal life. And so our story comes to its gentle close, just as sleep comes to the town of Hawkins on this peaceful night. The streets are quiet now, bathed in soft streetlight and gentle moonbeams. In houses throughout the town, our heroes sleep soundly, their dreams filled with hope rather than fear. Will Byers rests peacefully in his bed, his sketchpad filled with drawings of his friends and family rather than visions from another world. His breathing is steady and calm, his connection to darkness finally severed by love and sacrifice. Eleven sleeps in her new home with Hopper, no longer hiding, but living openly as Jane Hopper, a girl with a future full of possibilities. Her powers remain, but they no longer define her. She is free to choose how to use her gifts in service of the light, rather than being controlled by others. Mike dreams of dancing, of friendship, of adventures yet to come, that will be filled with wonder rather than terror. His basement remains the heart of their group, a safe space where imagination and camaraderie create their own magic. The others, Dustin, Lucas, Nancy, Jonathan, Steve, Joyce, all sleep the sleep of people who have faced their darkest fears and emerged victorious, not through violence, but through love, loyalty, and the refusal to abandon each other when the world seemed lost. The shadow monster remains banished in its dark realm, unable to breach the barriers that protect our world. Its influence has been purged from Hawkins, leaving only the strength and wisdom that come from surviving impossible trials together. The autumn air hung heavy over the small town of Hawkins, Indiana, carrying with it the whisper of change and the promise of challenges yet to come. In the fading light of October, shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should, and the wind carried sounds that didn't quite belong to the natural world. With the quiet moments before the storm, those precious instances when friends gather, when plans are made, and when ordinary children prepare to face extraordinary circumstances. The kind of moments that, when remembered later, feel both infinitely precious and impossibly distant. Mike Wheeler sat in his basement, the familiar hum of fluorescent lights, creating a cocoon of warmth against the growing darkness outside. Around him, his friends gathered as they had countless times before. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the weight of responsibility pressed down on their young shoulders like a heavy blanket. Dustin Henderson adjusted his cap nervously, his usual cheerful demeanor tempered by the gravity of what they faced. Lucas Sinclair cleaned his glasses methodically, a habit that had intensified as the supernatural had become their reality. Will Byers, still bearing the invisible scars of his ordeal, sat quietly, his gentle nature unchanged despite all he had endured. The older kids, Jonathan Byers with his protective instincts, Nancy Wheeler with her fierce determination, and Steve Harrington with his unexpected courage, formed their own circle of planning and preparation. Each carried their own burdens, their own fears, but also their own unshakable commitment to protecting those they loved. Joyce Byers moved through her house with the restless energy of a mother who had already lost her child once, and would move heaven and earth to prevent it from happening again. Her love was a force of nature, as powerful as any supernatural threat they might face. Chief Jim Hopper checked his equipment one more time, his gruff exterior hiding a heart that had been broken and slowly mended through his connection to a very special young girl. His duty to protect the town had become something more personal, more urgent, and somewhere in the spaces between worlds, in the cold and twisted reflection of their reality, something ancient and hungry stirred. The shadow monster, a creature of malice and consumption, had tasted their world and found it wanting. It sought not just to invade, but to transform, to remake everything in its own image of darkness and decay. But tonight, we focus not on the monster, but on those who would stand against it. For in the face of overwhelming darkness, it is not the size of the threat that matters, but the size of the hearts that oppose it. The plans were made with the careful precision of those who understood that failure was not an option. Every detail was considered, every contingency planned for. They would divide their forces, attack from multiple fronts, and trust in the bonds of friendship and family that had brought them this far. As the night deepened and the time for action approached, there was a moment of perfect stillness, a moment when each person present understood that they were part of something larger than themselves, something that would define not just their own futures, but the future of everyone they held. The basement fell quiet, except for the steady breathing of friends who had become family, of children who had been forced to become heroes, of adults who had learned to believe in the impossible. In that quiet moment, courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. The Hawkins National Laboratory stood like a fortress against the night sky, its institutional walls hiding secrets that had festered in darkness for far too long. Within those walls, science had crossed lines that should never be crossed, and the consequences of those transgressions were about to come to light. Martin Brenner, the man they called Papa, had built his career on the exploitation of extraordinary abilities, on the belief that the ends justified any means. His laboratory was a monument to ambition unchecked by conscience, to curiosity untempered by compassion. But tonight, the laboratory would become something else entirely. Tonight, it would become a battleground. The building hummed with an energy that was not entirely electrical. The boundaries between worlds had grown thin here, worn away by years of experimentation and the recent incursions of the shadow monster. Reality itself seemed to bend and warp in the corridors where so much suffering had taken place. As our heroes approached the laboratory, they carried with them not just weapons and plans, but something far more powerful, the unshakable belief that love and friendship could triumph over even the darkest evil. They had learned, through trial and hardship, that the most powerful force in any universe is the connection between hearts that refuse to give up on each other. The laboratory's security systems, designed to keep secrets in and intruders out, proved inadequate against the determination of those fighting for everything they held dear. Doors that had seemed impenetrable opened before the combined will of the group. Guards who had seemed invincible found themselves facing not just physical resistance, but the moral authority of those fighting for justice. Through sterile corridors they moved, past rooms where unthinkable experiments had been conducted, past cells where children had been imprisoned and tortured in the name of science. Each step forward was a step toward redemption, toward the possibility that the suffering inflicted in these halls might finally serve a purpose greater than the ambitions of those who had caused it. The deeper they went into the laboratory, the more the walls seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. The shadow monster's influence was strongest here, in this place where the barriers between worlds had been so carelessly weakened. But our heroes pressed on, guided by a light that no darkness could extinguish. In the heart of the laboratory, they found what they were looking for, the source of the contamination, the nexus point where the shadow monster's influence was strongest. It was here that the final confrontation would take place, here that the fate of their world would be decided. The laboratory's gleaming surfaces reflected not just their faces, but their determination. In those reflections they saw not just children and teenagers and adults, but warriors in the truest sense, people who had chosen to stand up to evil, not because they were unafraid, but because they refused to let fear control them. As they prepared for the battle to come, they took a moment to look at each other, to remember why they were fighting. For Will, who deserved to live free from the shadow that had touched his life. For 11, who had known nothing but pain, and deserved to know love. For their families, their friends, their town, their world. The laboratory around them seemed to hold its breath, as if the very building understood that it was about to witness something unprecedented. The sterile halls that had echoed with screams would now echo with the sounds of courage in action. In the deepest part of the laboratory, where the fluorescent lights flickered with an otherworldly rhythm, the shadow monster made its presence known. It was not merely a creature, but a force of nature, ancient, patient, and utterly without mercy or compassion. The monster had no true form, existing as it did between dimensions, but its influence was everywhere. The air grew thick and oppressive, filled with the scent of decay and the whisper of voices that spoke in languages predating human civilization. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with malevolent life, and the temperature dropped until breath became visible in the suddenly frigid air. Our heroes stood at the threshold of the monster's domain, feeling the weight of its attention settle upon them like a physical force. Fear was natural in such moments. Fear was human, but they had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Mike stepped forward first, his young voice carrying a strength that belied his years. "We're not afraid of you," he said, and though his voice trembled slightly, the words rang with truth. Behind him his friends formed a protective circle, each drawing strength from the others. The shadow monster's response was immediate and overwhelming. The very air seemed to writhe with malevolent energy, and the walls around them cracked and groaned under the pressure of interdimensional forces. But our heroes held their ground, linked by bonds that had been forged in shared danger and tempered by mutual sacrifice. Dustin's scientific mind worked quickly, analyzing the creature's behavior. looking for patterns and weaknesses. Lucas stood ready to act, his practical nature focusing on concrete steps they could take. Will, despite his connection to the monster, found strength in his friend's presence, their love serving as an anchor to keep him grounded in their reality. The older members of their group formed a protective perimeter, each ready to lay down their lives if necessary. Jonathan's fierce protective instincts, Nancy's unwavering determination, and Steve's hard-won courage created a wall of human will against the encroaching darkness. Joyce's maternal love blazed like a beacon in the darkness, her devotion to her son creating a light that the shadow monster seemed unable to fully extinguish. Hopper's determination to protect those under his care transformed him into an immovable object, a force of nature in his own right. But it was clear that conventional weapons and human determination, powerful though they were, might not be enough. The shadow monster was vast, ancient, and utterly alien. It had consumed entire dimensions, reduced countless worlds to empty husks. What hope did one small group of humans have against such a force? The answer came not from strength or weaponry, but from love itself. As the monster pressed its attack, growing stronger and more aggressive, our heroes discovered that their greatest weapon was not any tool or strategy, but the connections between them. Their love for each other, their refusal to abandon one another, created a light that the darkness found increasingly difficult to penetrate. Will, despite his connection to the monster, found that his friend's love served as a lifeline, allowing him to maintain his humanity, even as the creature tried to claim him completely. Through their bond, he was able to provide crucial information about the monster's nature and weakness. The laboratory around them continued to deteriorate as reality warped under the pressure of the interdimensional conflict. But in the center of the chaos, our heroes stood firm, their love for each other creating an island of stability in a sea of supernatural chaos. As the battle reached its crescendo, it became clear that victory would require a sacrifice that none of them had fully anticipated. The shadow monster's power was too great to be defeated by conventional means, and its influence too pervasive to be simply contained. It was then that Eleven made her choice. The young girl with extraordinary abilities had spent her entire life being told that she was a weapon, a tool to be used by others for their own purposes. But in that moment, surrounded by friends who had shown her what it meant to be loved for who she was, rather than what she could do, she chose to use her power not as a weapon, but as an act of love. Her friends watched in awe and terror as she stepped forward, her small figure dwarfed by the immensity of the shadow monster's presence. But there was nothing small about her courage, nothing insignificant about her determination to protect those she had come to love as family. No, Mike called out, understanding immediately what she intended to do. But she turned to him with a smile that was both heartbreaking and beautiful, a smile that spoke of love and sacrifice, and the unshakable belief that some things were worth any price. Friends don't lie, she said softly, using the phrase that had become their sacred bond, their promise to each other. In those 3 words, she conveyed everything: her love for them, her gratitude for their acceptance, and her determination to ensure their safety no matter the cost to herself. The power that flowed through her was unlike anything she had ever channeled before. It was not the cold, clinical energy that Dr. Brenner had taught her to harness, but something warm and golden, and infinitely more powerful. It was love made manifest, compassion given form, the protective instinct of a heart that had learned to care more for others than for itself. The shadow monster recoiled as if struck by a physical blow. For the first time since its arrival in their dimension, it encountered something it could not consume, could not corrupt, could not understand. Love, pure and selfless and freely given, was anathema to its nature. The laboratory shook as interdimensional energies clashed, as the force of human love met the ancient hunger of the shadow monster. Light blazed through the corridors, not the harsh fluorescent glare of the institution, but a warm golden radiance that seemed to heal everything it touched. Through it all, 11 stood at the center of the storm, her small hands extended, channeling power that threatened to tear her apart. Even as it drove back the darkness, her friends could only watch, their hearts breaking even as they swelled with pride at her courage. The monster's roars of rage and pain echoed through dimensions, a sound that spoke of an ancient evil facing its first true defeat. But it was not just the power that drove it back. It was the love behind that power, the willing sacrifice of one who had found something more important than her own survival. As the golden light intensified, the shadow monster began to retreat, its form becoming less solid, less present in their reality. The cracks in the walls began to seal, the oppressive atmosphere began to lift, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, hope returned to the sterile corridors of the laboratory. But victory came at a price that none of them had been prepared to pay. As the last echoes of the shadow monster's defeat faded into silence, the laboratory fell into an eerie calm. The supernatural storm had passed, leaving behind only the soft sound of settling debris and the gentle hum of machinery slowly returning to normal function. In the center of the room where the greatest battle had taken place, 11 stood motionless, her small form silhouetted against the fading golden light. The power she had channeled had taken its toll, leaving her pale and trembling, but her eyes still held the fierce determination that had carried her through the fight. Her friends rushed to her side, their relief at the monster's defeat tempered by concern for the girl who had made it possible. Mike reached her first, his young face etched with worry as he gently took her hand. "Elle, are you okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She looked at him with eyes that seemed older than her years, eyes that had seen too much darkness but had chosen to focus on the light. "I'm tired, Mike," she said softly, and in those simple words they all heard the weight of what she had endured. The others gathered around her, forming a protective circle of love and support. Dustin's usual chatter was subdued, replaced by a gentle concern that spoke to the depth of his caring. Lucas stood ready to help in whatever way he could, his practical nature focused on making sure she was safe. Will, understanding better than anyone the cost of facing the darkness, offered his silent support. Joyce knelt beside the young girl, her maternal instincts taking over as she gently brushed 11's hair from her face. "You did so well, sweetheart," she whispered. "You saved us all." Hopper's gruff exterior cracked as he looked at the child he had come to love as his own daughter. The tough police chief felt tears threatening as he realized the magnitude of what she had done, the price she had been willing to pay for their safety. But even as they celebrated their victory, they could all sense that something had changed. The battle had been won, but it had left its mark on all of them, and perhaps most deeply on the girl who had stood at its center. 11's powers, which had blazed so brilliantly during the confrontation, seemed different now, quieter, more controlled, but also somehow diminished. It was as if the enormous effort of defeating the shadow monster had fundamentally altered her connection to the supernatural forces she commanded. "I don't think I can do it anymore," she admitted quietly, holding up her hand and concentrating. Where once objects would have moved with barely an effort, now there was only the faintest stirring of energy. "It's like it's all used up." Mike squeezed her hand tighter. "It doesn't matter," he said fiercely. "Powers or no powers, you're still our friend. You're still family." The others nodded their agreement, their love for her unchanged by any alteration in her abilities. They had learned that what made 11 special was not what she could do but who she was. Her courage, her loyalty, her capacity for love, despite everything she had endured. As they helped her to her feet and began to make their way out of the ruined laboratory, they could feel the weight of change settling over them. The world they were returning to would be different from the one they had left. They had all been changed by what they had experienced, marked by the courage they had shown and the love they had shared. But they were together, and that was what mattered most. They had faced the darkness and emerged into the light, scarred perhaps, but unbroken. Their bond had been tested in the crucible of supernatural horror, and it emerged stronger than ever. The laboratory behind them stood empty now, its corridors echoing with the memory of their triumph. The secrets it had held had been exposed. The evil it had harbored had been defeated. It would never again serve as a source of suffering for innocence. The days following the confrontation passed in a strange sort of quiet, like the hushed calm that follows a thunderstorm. Hawkins, Indiana, went about its daily business, unaware that it had come so close to a fate worse than destruction. The supernatural crisis had been averted, but for those who had lived through it, the world felt fundamentally different. 11 found herself in an unexpected position. For the first time in her life, she was truly free from the laboratory, free from Dr. Brenner's control, free from the constant threat of being used as a weapon. But freedom, she discovered, was both wonderful and terrifying. Hopper had officially taken her in, creating a small cabin in the woods, where she could live safely away from prying eyes. It was a simple place, but it was filled with something she had never experienced before, the unconditional love of a father figure who wanted nothing from her except her happiness. The cabin became a sanctuary, a place where she could learn what it meant to be a normal girl. Hopper taught her about the world outside the laboratory walls, about television and music, and the simple pleasures of everyday life. Joyce visited often, bringing a maternal warmth that helped heal wounds that went deeper than any physical injury. Mike and the other boys came by whenever they could, their friendship providing a bridge between her extraordinary past and her hoped-for ordinary future. They played games, told stories, and slowly helped her understand that she was valued not for what she could do, but for who she was. The loss of most of her powers was something she grieved, but not in the way Dr. Brenner might have expected. She mourned not the loss of her abilities themselves, but the sense of purpose they had given her. For so long her powers had been her identity, her value, her reason for existing. Now she had to learn who she was without them. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," she confided to Mike one afternoon, as they sat on the cabin's small porch, watching the sunlight filter through the trees. Mike considered this seriously, as he did all of her concern. "Maybe," he said finally, "you're not supposed to do anything except be yourself. Maybe that's enough." It was a radical concept for someone who had been told her entire life that she existed to serve others. But gradually, she began to understand what he meant. She was learning to find joy in simple things, the taste of Eggo waffles, the sound of laughter, the feeling of safety that came from being surrounded by people who loved her. Will, meanwhile, was undergoing his own process of healing. The connection he had shared with the shadow monster had left him changed in ways that were difficult to explain. He found himself more sensitive to the supernatural, more aware of the thin places where reality wore thin. But rather than being a burden, this sensitivity became a gift, allowing him to serve as an early warning system should such threats ever return. His relationship with his friends had deepened through their shared ordeal. They had seen him at his most vulnerable, and had never wavered in their support. That kind of loyalty, he knew, was rarer than any supernatural power. The older members of their group were dealing with their own adjustment. Jonathan and Nancy had discovered reserves of courage they never knew they possessed. Steve had found that his capacity for heroism ran deeper than anyone, including himself, had suspected. Joyce and Hopper had been drawn together by their shared experience of facing the impossible. Their relationship deepened into something that was part friendship, part partnership, and part mutual support system for two people who had learned that the world was far stranger and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The town of Hawkins itself seemed to breathe easier, though most of its residents would never know why. The oppressive atmosphere that had hung over the community during the crisis had lifted, replaced by the normal rhythms of small-town life. As winter gave way to spring, the events at the laboratory began to feel like a distant nightmare. The facility itself had been shuttered, its dark experiments finally brought to an end. The official story spoke of gas leaks and structural failures, but those who knew the truth understood that some secrets were too dangerous to be shared with the world at large. 11, who had chosen the name Jane for her new life, was learning to navigate the complexities of normal teenage existence. It was more challenging than facing interdimensional monsters in some ways, but far more rewarding. She attended school through correspondence courses, slowly catching up on the education she had been denied. Her friendship with the boys had evolved into something deeper and more complex. They were no longer just her rescuers or her protectors. They were her peers, her chosen family, the people who knew her best and loved her most. Their bond had been forged in crisis, but was sustained by genuine affection and mutual respect. Mike, in particular, had become something special to her. Their relationship was innocent and sweet, marked by shared glances and gentle touches, and the kind of pure emotion that only comes with first love. They were learning together what it meant to care for someone beyond yourself, to find joy in another person's happiness. The other boys had their own journeys of growth and discovery. Dustin's scientific curiosity had been tempered by his experience with the supernatural, but not diminished. He approached the world with the same enthusiasm, but with a deeper understanding of the responsibility that came with knowledge. Lucas had discovered hidden depths of courage and leadership within himself. The crisis had revealed that his practical nature and quick thinking made him an invaluable member of any team. He carried himself with a new confidence, secure in the knowledge that he could be counted on when it mattered most. Will continued to heal from his ordeal, supported by friends who understood that recovery was a process, not a destination. His gentle nature had not been hardened by his experience with darkness, but rather refined and strengthened. He had looked into the abyss and chosen to remain kind, which was perhaps the greatest victory of all. The adults in their lives had their own adjustments to make. Joyce had learned to trust her instincts even when they seemed impossible. Her love for her son had been her guiding star through the darkest moments, and it continued to be her strength as they built their new life together. Hopper had discovered that being a father was both the most terrifying and most rewarding role he had ever taken on. Watching Jane grow and learn and become more fully herself filled him with a pride he had never expected to feel again. Their relationship was built on mutual respect and genuine affection, a family created not by blood, but by choice. The town of Hawkins had returned to its normal rhythms, but for those who had lived through the crisis, normal would never be quite the same. They had seen the darkness that lurked at the edges of reality, but they had also discovered the light that lived within human hearts. They had learned that love was not just an emotion, but a force, a power that could stand against even the most ancient evils. As the anniversary of their confrontation with the shadow monster approached, the group found themselves drawn together in remembrance and reflection. They had all changed in the months that followed, grown in ways both subtle and profound, but their bond remained unbreakable. They gathered at the cabin where Jane now lived with Hopper, the simple wooden structure having become a symbol of the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. The evening was warm and comfortable, filled with the easy conversation of people who had shared the deepest and most meaningful experiences of their lives. Jane had prepared dinner with Joyce's help, taking pride in her growing domestic skill. The meal was simple, but made with love, and they ate together as the sun set through the trees, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we hadn't stopped it?" Dustin asked, his usual levity tempered by genuine curiosity. "Sometimes," Mike admitted, "but then I remember that we did stop it, and that's what matters. We all stopped it," Jane said quietly. "It wasn't just me, it was all of us together." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "I think that's what made the difference. The monster was alone, but we weren't. We had each other." Will, who had been quiet through most of the meal, finally spoke. "I used to have nightmares about it coming back, but I don't anymore. I think when you face something like that and win, it changes you, makes you stronger." Joyce reached over and squeezed his hand. "You were always strong, honey. You just didn't know it yet." Hopper looked around the table at the faces of these remarkable young people and felt a surge of pride that had nothing to do with his role as Jane's guardian. They had all shown a kind of courage that adults twice their age would have found difficult to muster. "You know what I think?" he said, his gruff voice unusually gentle. I think you all learned something that most people never figure out. That real strength isn't about being the biggest or the toughest or having the most power. It's about being willing to stand up for what's right, even when you're scared, especially when you're scared. Nancy and Jonathan, who had been listening from the kitchen doorway, came to join them at the table. Steve arrived a few minutes later, bringing ice cream and his own brand of hard-won wisdom. You guys saved the world, he said matter-of-factly, as he scooped ice cream into bowl. That's pretty awesome. We saved our world, Jane corrected gently. The people we love, the place we call home, that's what mattered. As the evening wore on, and the stars came out, they found themselves talking about the future, college plans and career dreams, the ordinary concerns of young people with their whole lives ahead of them. But underlying it all was the unspoken understanding that they would always be connected by what they had shared. The supernatural crisis that had brought them together had ended, but the relationships it had forged would last a lifetime. They had learned that family was not just about blood relations, but about the people who stood by you when everything else fell apart. Jane looked around at the faces of these people who had become her family, and felt a contentment she had never imagined possible. The laboratory and its horrors seemed like a distant nightmare now, replaced by the warm reality of belonging somewhere, of being loved for who she was rather than what she could do. As the night deepened and the conversation turned to quieter topics, there was a sense of completion in the air. Not an ending, but a transformation, the closing of one chapter and the beginning of another. Mike walked with Jane to the edge of the woods, where fireflies danced in the darkness like tiny stars come down to earth. They stood together in comfortable silence, two young people who had faced the impossible and found strength in each other. Are you happy? Mike asked, his voice soft in the darkness. Jane considered the question seriously, as she did most things. I think so, she said finally. I'm learning what happy means. It's different from what I expected. Different how? Quieter, she said. I thought it would be bigger, somehow, more dramatic. But it's really about small things, like dinner with friends, like watching movies with Hopper, like this. She gestured to the peaceful scene around them, the cabin glowing warmly in the distance, the sound of their friends' laughter drifting through the night air. Mike nodded, understanding. They had all learned that heroism wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic moments, but about the choice to do the right thing, even when it was difficult. And happiness, it seemed, followed the same pattern. Inside the cabin, the others were settling in for the night. It had become a tradition of sorts, these gatherings at the anniversary of their victory. Not a celebration exactly, but a remembrance of what they had overcome and what they had gained in the process. Dustin was already asleep on the couch, his cap askew and a contented smile on his face. Lucas and Will were quietly discussing a book they had both read, their conversation the comfortable exchange of friends who had shared extraordinary experience. Joyce and Hopper sat at the kitchen table, nursing cups of coffee and talking in low voices about their children and their hopes for the future. They had found in each other understanding that came from having lived through the impossible. Nancy and Jonathan had stepped outside to look at the stars, their own relationship deepened by the trials they had faced together. Steve dozed in an armchair, finally, at peace with the man he had become through adversity. As Jane and Mike rejoined the group, there was a moment of perfect harmony. These people, brought together by crisis and united by love, had created something beautiful from something terrible. They had transformed their trauma into strength, their fear into courage, their isolation into connection. I want to remember this, Jane said softly, looking around at the faces of her chosen family. Not the fighting or the fear, but this feeling of being home. And in that moment, they all understood that they had achieved something more valuable than victory over any monster. They had created a bond that would sustain them through whatever challenges life might bring. They had learned that love was not just an emotion, but a choice, made new each day through small acts of kindness and understanding. The shadow monster had been defeated not by power or violence, but by the simple decision of a group of people to care more about each other than about their own safety. That lesson, that truth, would stay with them forever. Years would pass, and the children would grow into adults, each carrying forward the lessons learned in those dark days. They would face new challenges, different kinds of monsters, but they would face them with the knowledge that they were not alone. Jane would grow into a young woman of remarkable strength and compassion, her difficult beginning transformed into a foundation for helping others. She would never fully regain her supernatural abilities, but she would discover that her greatest power had always been her capacity for love. Mike would become a teacher, inspired by his own experience of learning that the most important lessons often came from the most unlikely sources. He would carry forward the understanding that true knowledge was not just about facts, but about wisdom and compassion. Dustin would pursue his love of science, but always with the understanding that knowledge carried responsibility. His research would be guided by the principle that the purpose of discovery was to help, not to harm. Lucas would find his calling in community service, his practical nature, and newfound confidence, making him a natural leader. He would work to make his community safer and stronger, one person at a time. Will would become an artist, channeling his sensitive nature and unique experiences into works that helped others understand that beauty could emerge from even the darkest circumstances. His gentle spirit would be a beacon of hope for those who had also faced their own forms of darkness. The adults would carry forward their own lessons. Joyce would continue to trust her instincts and fight for her children with the fierce determination of a mother's love. Hopper would remain a protector, but with the deeper understanding that true strength came from vulnerability and connection. Nancy would pursue journalism, driven by the knowledge that truth was worth fighting for, even when it was difficult or dangerous. Jonathan would find his own path in documenting the stories of those who needed their voices heard. Steve would discover that heroism was not about being the strongest or the most popular, but about being willing to do what was right, even when it was hard. He would carry that lesson into every aspect of his life. And in the quiet moments, when the world seemed too dark or too difficult, they would remember that night in the laboratory, when a small group of people chose love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair. They would remember that they had faced the ultimate darkness and emerged into the light, not because they were special or chosen, but because they had chosen each other. The bonds forged in that crucible of supernatural terror would prove to be unbreakable, a source of strength that would sustain them through all the ordinary and extraordinary challenges that life would bring. They had learned the most important lesson of all, that love, freely given and gratefully received, was the greatest power in any universe. And sometimes on quiet nights, when the stars were especially bright, they would gather again at the cabin in the woods, older now, but no less connected, to remember and to celebrate the moment when they discovered that the light within human hearts could overcome even the deepest darkness. The shadow monster was gone, defeated not by force but by love, and the light it had tried to extinguish burned brighter than ever, carried forward by those who had learned that the greatest victory was not conquering evil, but choosing good, again and again, in all the small moments that make up a life. Close your eyes and let me tell you a story of friendship, courage, and the quiet moments that follow great adventures. In the small town of Hawkins, Indiana, autumn leaves are falling like whispered secrets, and our young heroes are learning that some battles echo long after they're won. Will Byers has returned from the Upside Down, but shadows still dance at the edges of his vision. Like memories that visit us in dreams, the dark realm calls to him through flashing lights and cold shivers. His mother Joyce watches over him with the fierce tenderness only a parent knows, while his brother Jonathan captures life through his camera lens, freezing moments of peace. Meanwhile, 11, our brave girl with extraordinary gifts, lives quietly in a cabin in the woods with Chief Hopper. He's become the father she never had, teaching her about the world through old television shows and Eggo waffles. She practices her powers in secret, moving objects with her mind like autumn leaves caught in a gentle breeze. The boys continue their campaigns around the table, rolling dice and imagining adventures, but Mike's heart aches for his missing friend. Lucas and Dustin discover that growing up means new interests, Lucas finds himself drawn to Max, the skateboard-riding newcomer with fiery red hair, while Dustin adopts a strange pet he calls Dart. But Hawkins holds deeper secrets. Beneath the earth, tunnels spread like roots of some sleeping giant. The government facility continues its quiet work, unaware that they've awakened something vast and hungry. The Mind Flayer, an ancient shadow from another world, reaches through the barriers between dimensions, seeking to claim our world as its own. Nancy and Jonathan, united by shared trauma and growing affection, work together to expose the truth. Steve Harrington, no longer the popular king but something better, a protector and friend, finds himself babysitting the kids with surprising grace and genuine care. As the darkness spreads through Hawkins like winter's first frost, our heroes must come together once more. Joyce and Hopper venture into the cold tunnels beneath the town. Nancy and Jonathan face their fears in the shadowy realm. The children, brave beyond their years, stand guard and fight with makeshift weapons and unwavering loyalty. But this is also a story of quiet victory, of Mike and Eleven's reunion, tender as a whispered promise, of families healing and friendships deepening, of a small town that faces the impossible and emerges stronger, bound together by shared secrets and mutual care. In the end, love proves stronger than fear. The Mind Flayer retreats to wait for another season. The portal closes like a door softly shutting. Hawkins settles into peaceful winter, its people safe beneath blankets of snow and starlight. The story ends where all good stories do, with our heroes safe, their battles won, ready for dreams of simpler adventures. The Upside Down grows quiet. The lights stop flickering. Even monsters need their rest. Close your eyes now. You are safe in your own warm bed, far from tunnels and shadow. Let the peaceful silence of Hawkins carry you into gentle dreams, where friendship conquers all, and morning always comes. Sleep well.